Good morning, guys. We are back here with our coach book, and we are working on our science packet. So if you want to follow along, we are on page 73. We are looking at local weather patterns here. And so it's going to ask us to do some copying, and I'm going to continue to read like we've been doing. So local weather patterns. Weather changes from day to day. It also changes from season to season. Those changes in weather happen in a regular way. In other words, they follow certain patterns. A place's weather pattern depends on where it is located on Earth. The weather changes daily. It may be a cloudy one day and bright and sunny the next. One day may not be hot, the next day may be much cooler. The table below shows how weather conditions might change over 3 days in North Carolina. Notice that the air temperature is measured in degrees Fahrenheit. Wind speed is measured in miles per hour. Meteorologists try to make predictions about the changes, like those in the table. So if you look at this real quick, you'll notice that this isn't our weather this current year, where we've gone from 60-degree weather to 30-degree weather. And it's probably guess what season we are in about right now. We're probably in spring. If you look at 65, 80, and 70, we're averaging about 73, 74 a day when you add them all up and you divide. So that's about spring-like weather. We're known to have 80-degree weather in our spring-like environment. So it's possible. So if you'll take a moment right here, and it says weather changes daily, but similar patterns create blank that are repeated every year. Okay, we have not gotten to that part yet. Fill in the chart to learn more about our local weather in North Carolina. So spring, we cannot fill that out. That's going to be on the back of the page. I was making sure that it was not the table at the very beginning. Okay, so look down here to seasonal weather patterns. Although the weather changes daily, similar patterns are repeated every year. In most places, winters are cooler than summers. It is true in North Carolina. Winter may not be as cold this year as it was last year, but you can predict that it will be colder in December than in July. So we can look at our first question here, and it says, weather changes daily, but similar patterns create blank that repeat each year. We're going to come back and see if it's on the other page, because I would think it would be patterns, but it says right here, weather changes daily, but similar patterns create blank that repeat every year. They say right here, repeat every year, similar patterns. So we will look to see if it's on the back before we choose that answer. Okay. You can study. Oops, sorry. You can study the patterns of North Carolina's weather. You can use what you learn to predict the type of weather you will see for each season. For example, if you live in the mountains of western North Carolina, you will likely have snow in winter. If you live in the hilly middle part of the state, you can expect to have less snow. If your home is in the flat eastern part, you may not have snow at all. But no matter where you live in North Carolina, you will not see snow in July. So I know some of you always get so upset when we don't have snow. We live closer to the coast. We are in that flat region there. So therefore, it's just where we're located that we don't see as much snow as the mountains. So don't be upset. I'm sure you can always move when you get older to go to live with all as much snow as you want. So, North Carolina's weather is fairly mild. Temperatures in the eastern section are mild because of the Atlantic Ocean is nearby. Winters are cool and there are days that there are cold. The temperature in Raleigh in winter is usually above freezing. Summers in North Carolina are hot. North Carolina gets lots of precipitation. Most of it is rain. Snow falls at times in the mountains, but less often in the rest of the state. Precipitation is usually the greatest in summer, with July bringing the wettest month. Fall is the driest season, and November is the driest month. The chart below shows some weather conditions for each season in North Carolina. Notice that the last column lists the storms that are likely in each season. Severe summer thunderstorms with strong winds and hail are common. North Carolina can also be affected by hurricanes. We've learned with Hurricane Matthew, particularly along the coast. A hurricane is a large storm that brings strong winds and heavy rains. Hurricanes form over warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean. When a hurricane moves from the water to its land, it causes floods, beach erosion, and property damage. So if you'll look right here, and it says spring, mild, rain, thunderstorms, and tornadoes. We are known to have some tornadoes touch down. A couple years ago, we had some in Cumberland County. So you can see in spring and summer, we're most likely going to see tornadoes. Our fall is really when we're going to start seeing our hurricanes. Think about that fall is not the most active season when it comes to, it's the most active season when it comes to hurricanes. So the fact that we saw one in the fall last year made sense. And then winter, we could have some snowstorms. So right here, because we were waiting to answer this question here, it wants you to copy that little chart right here. So if you'll take a few minutes, and I'm going to move this so you can see, and I'm going to copy mine while you are copying yours. So I'm going to stop the video here and let you copy. Okay, guys, if you'll notice that once again, we still have not answered that first question. I'm not happy with what is written in the textbook and how this is written. So we're going to keep going. Maybe it'll pop up. I keep coming back to patterns, but when you look at weather changes daily, but similar patterns create patterns, they already use patterns. And so we'll come back to it. It might reappear a little bit later. So we are now on page 75. And we are looking at what affects weather patterns. Where is North Carolina located on Earth? How close is your town to the mountains or the ocean? The answers to these questions help explain the weather patterns where you live. The equator is an imaginary line that divides Earth in half horizontally. Latitude is the distance north to south of the equator. For example, the latitude of Raleigh is about 36 degrees north. A place's latitude helps determine its weather. The diagram below shows some latitudes. Also shows climate zones. Climate is an average weather of a place over a long period of time. And remember what we talked about weather in the previous one? Weather is just for that day and for just that period of time, where climate is the average weather or temperature for a given period over a given time, but it's a longer range. So if you'll look right here, and here's your latitudes here. Okay, so here's your latitudes. Here's the equator. We know the equator is one of the warmest places on Earth. And so that's why South America is very warm. And we are located right about around here. So we are not at 23.5. We're a little above it. That's why they're saying we're about 36 degrees north. So we are closer to the top of the North Pole. Now you can also see right here, this is called the temperate area. And when we talk about biomes, we talk about this as being the temperate region anyways. So we are located in the temperate region, meaning we are getting those specific climates. If you look down a little farther, you are seeing that this is the tropical region right here. And the tropical region is going to have a much different climate than our region. And then once again, we have a temperate region down here. And we are very familiar with this when we studied our biomes this year. Okay, so we should be able to answer the first one. Climate is the blank of a weather of a place over a long period of time. Climate is the average. So if you add that to your paper, weather of a place over a long period of time. The sun heats the earth blank. The sun heats the earth's. It's in this next paragraph that I haven't gotten to read yet. So we're going to start back down here. The sun heats Earth unevenly. The tropical zone is located closest to the equator. Areas in the zone get most energy from the sun, so they tend to be warm to hot all year. The polar regions are far from the equator, near Earth's North Pole and South Pole. These areas get least energy from the sun, so they tend to be cool to cold all year. The temperate zones are between the polar and tropical zones. North Carolina is in the north temperate zone. The amount of energy that the temperate zones get from the sun changes throughout the year. So these areas tend to have seasons with very different temperatures. Okay? So the sun heats Earth. The sun heats Earth unevenly. The tropical zone near the blank gets the most energy. So where the tropical zone near it's the next one. Next sentence, the equator gets the most energy from the sun. So these places are warmer. The polar zones are the farthest from the equator and get blank from these energy from the sun. So look at the polar regions here. What do they get? They get the least energy from the sun. So these places are colder all year. North Carolina is in the blank zone. What kind of zone are we in? We are in, look at that paragraph, North Carolina is in the temperate zone. We are in the north temperate zone between the polar and tropical zones. The amount of energy the temperate zone gets from the sun changes throughout the year. So these areas have blank with different temperatures. These areas have what? What do we have? We have seasons with different temperatures. Okay. Each half of Earth is a hemisphere. The half of the Earth above the equator is the northern hemisphere. The half of Earth below the equator is the southern hemisphere. The seasons and their weather patterns are opposite in these two hemispheres. When it is summer in the northern hemisphere, it is winter in the southern hemisphere. North Carolina is in the northern hemisphere, so when it's fall in North Carolina, places in the some southern hemisphere have spring. So if you look down here, it says half of the Earth above the equator is called the what hemisphere? We are in the northern hemisphere, and the half blank of the equator is the southern hemisphere. And the other half of the Earth below the equator, so it says hemisphere and half below the equator is called the southern hemisphere. When it is summer in north hemisphere, it is blank in the southern hemisphere. What do we say it was? They were having what? Spring in the southern hemisphere. The air near the Earth's surface tends to get cooler if you go. So we are going to turn the page now. We are now on page 76. Mountains affect temperature in general. High places have cooler temperature than lower places. The air near the Earth's surface tends to get cooler the higher you go. Temperatures tend to be cooler in the mountains of western North Carolina than in the flat eastern part of the state. Mountains can also affect precipitation. One example of the mountain's effect on rain is the rain shadow. Think of warm air moving towards the mountain. As the air reaches the mountain, it is forced upward because of the shape of the mountain. As the air moves upward, it cools. The water in the air masses and falls as precipitation, producing a wet slide of the mountain. That leaves cool, dry air which moves over the top of the mountain. Then it begins to move down along the slope of the mountain. As it sinks, it absorbs heat from the land and can hold more water. This often produces a dry area or desert on the far side of the mountain. The dry area is called a rain shadow. So let's see if we can answer any questions here. So the air near the Earth's surface tends to get cooler the higher you go. So the blank tend to have cooler temperatures. What tends to have cooler temperatures? The mountains, right? So the mountains have cooler temperatures. Air moving up the mountain causes water vapor to blank and fall as precipitation on one side of the mountain. So we are looking for air moving up. I'm kind of right over here. Let me zoom out. As the air reaches the mountain, it is forced to move upward because of the shape of the mountain. As the air moves up, it cools. The water in the air condenses and falls as precipitation. So right here, air moving up the mountain cools, causing water vapor to, what did we say it was? The water vapor is going to do what? See it? Condense and fall as precipitation on the side of the mountain. That leaves cool, blank air moving over the top of the mountain. So as air condenses, precipitation falls on makes the wet side of the mountain. That leaves cool, dry air, which moves over the top of the mountain. So what kind of cool leaves cool, dry air moving over the top of the mountain and down over the other side. As it sinks, it absorbs blank from the land and can hold more water and often create a dry area or desert on the far side of the mountain. So right here in this paragraph right here, it begins to move down along the slope of the mountain. As it sinks, it absorbs heat from the land and can hold more water. This often produces a dry area or desert on the far side of the mountain. The dry area is called a rain shadow. So over here, as it sinks, it absorbs, what is it absorbs? It absorbs heat from the land and can hold more water, which often create a dry area or desert on the far side of the mountain. The dry area is called, what do we call the dry area? Last line, rain shadow. Places near large bodies of water like oceans, lake tend to have blank weather. So we have a little less than 2 paragraphs left to read. Oceans and large lakes affect weather too. Oh, hold on. Did you know southwestern North Carolina is the rainiest region of the United States, eastern United States? It has an average rainfall of more than 90 inches per year. Wow, I didn't know that. Here, mountains force moisture, warm airs to move upward. They drop their water before passing through. So I didn't know that. Oceans and large lakes affect weather too. Places near large bodies of water tend to have milder weather than other areas of the same latitude. Water warms and cools much more slowly than land. In winter, warmer ocean water keeps nearby land warm. In summer, cooler ocean water helps keep the land cool. This is why the temperatures along the coast of North Carolina tend to be milder than those in other parts of the state. Areas near ocean also tend to get a lot of precipitation. Because remember, they are picking it up from our water cycle and it's carrying it and it's continuing to go through the cycle because it's picking it up. But it also makes sense when you go to the beach, it's very windy and it's cooler near the beach than if you were to go farther inland, it's going to be a lot warmer. Doesn't mean you still won't get burned at the beach though. So places near large bodies of water, like oceans and lakes, tend to have blank weather. So they tend to have what kind of weather? Milder weather than other areas of the same latitude. Warm water cools much more than land. It cools much more slowly than land, which is why temperatures along the coast of North Carolina tend to be blank than those in other parts of the state. They tend to be, right here, milder than those in other parts of the state. Okay, so we are going to go over here to our questions. What is weather like during a hurricane? Snowy and windy, warm and dry, windy and wet, or cold and dry? Number 2, latitudes farthest from the equator tend to be hot all year, cold all year, get the most rain, or have the most hurricane. Latitudes farthest from the equator. Farthest. Which kind of weather are areas near the ocean most likely to have? What kind of weather is near oceans most likely to have? Mild and wet, cold and wet, mild and dry, or hot and dry? In which season in North Carolina most likely have the coldest temperatures? Spring, fall, spring, winter, or summer? And what type of precipitation falls the most often in North Carolina? Snow, hail, rain, or sleet?